I am here with Tony Gardner at Altarian Incorporated in Azusa, California.
We are Azusa, Baldwin Park, Irwindale, wherever you want us to be. We're in the middle of nowhere, basically.
And yet we are sitting in a display conference room full of famous characters out here in the middle of nowhere. I'm looking at Chucky. I'm looking at a figure from a recent Daft Punk installation. And Altarian's done lots of stuff. You guys know their work from Bad Grandpa with Johnny Knoxville, from Who is America with Sacha Baron Cohen recently, Hocus Pocus, Cult of Chucky, and a few other Chucky films, Three Kings, Shallow Hal, and many others. But we're here today to talk about your work on Zombieland Double Tap. Welcome back to the franchise, by the way.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be back. It's weird that 10 years have gone by. It didn't seem like it would take that long, but here we are.
I agree. I am surprised it took so long because that film was so great and successful at the time. And in the interim, Woody was already a star, but the other three have become superstars. And so I'm shocked that they actually were able to get them all back on board, but not really because it was so great the first time around.
Yeah, I think everybody enjoyed the experience, and they all actually had script approval for this one in order to be willing to come back. So the fact that they're all on it meant that it was going to be a good script. So when we got it, it was definitely one of those laugh out loud kind of reads, the same way the first one was. And knowing that it was going to be all the same people, you knew the tone that the characters were going to have. So it just looked like it was going to be a lot of fun.
So you had a tall order to fill with the success of that first one. It's always hard to follow up a great movie.
Yeah.
So can you tell me a little bit about your conversations with Ruben Fleischer? Is it Fleischer or Fleischer?
Fleischer.
With Ruben and the producers about how you guys would not only honor and match the level of the first, but build on it and take it even further.
Okay, well, it's interesting because we started the first one with a lot of conversations about how do we ground this in reality and what do we do to make this realistic, because the comedy came from the scenario that the people would be thrown into, but there had to be a genuine horror to the experience. So we went with the premise of certain diseases like hoof and mouth disease and bed sores and things where your body's like sort of decaying and sort of melting towards the interior. And they're very much like sort of a hot, sweaty, drippy mess. And they're leaking out of their eyes and their noses and probably everywhere else. And now all of a sudden it's 10 years later and it's like, well, wouldn't they have dried out by now? Wouldn't they like stop moving? So we had a lot of conversations about, well, there's probably still pockets of people out there that are getting picked off eventually. So there can be some fresh meat. And we did a few makeup tests right off the bat where we took the ideas of the first film and tried to project, all right, if they've moved further along in their life cycle or death cycle and they're drying out now, they've leaked out everything, so now they're drying out. So do they get sort of like Return of the Living Dead, half corpse kind of emaciated, or can we play it where like maybe the skin pulls back and we see more of the teeth and the bone structure on everything? And we did a couple tests like that. And it was funny because Ruben was the one actually who said, all these make sense and there's good logic to what we're doing. But he said the truth of the matter is there's a signature Zombieland look. And these things need to be true to that look. And which was basically the open wounds, the skin caving in, the discoloration, the mismatched eyes, and then the blacks and the browns leaking from everywhere. So we thought, all right, well, if we still have our contemporary zombies matching the look of 10 years ago, maybe these ones that are like the smarter, hardened ones can actually sort of carry some of the traits that we were messing around with as looks for the sequel originally, the dried out look. And we actually went into sort of like a a sun-baked meat sort of look where everybody's a little, not quite barbecue chicken-ish, but it kind of goes in that direction where there's a little more reds and browns and a little more sun-baked sort of vibe with their look. And then even though they're dead, we thought, well, if you're out in the sun and blistering and the heat's making an impact, maybe we can mess with that so that we've got a little more visual difference between the T-800s and the rest of them. But if you've seen the movie, you know that the T-800s also move so fast that you barely see them to register all the differences. There were a lot of T-800s that we did that were done specifically as close-up zombies so that you could see that these were hardier and they could take a beating and keep on coming. One guy has most of his jaw gone. One guy has part of his head gone on one side. There's two females with their heads basically blown open in different ways where it looks like they've been assaulted or attacked and just sort of like knocked apart a little bit, but they just keep on coming. But they move so fast through that finale sequence, you don't really see it. So it's like you know, the behind-the-scenes photos are going to give you more of an idea of what the new ones look like than what you see in the film, because you see the very first one really well. Ari Loeb played T-800 number 1 and did an amazing job. But after that, it's just they're just on fire and just coming at you.
I'm really glad that you brought up Ruben's desire to keep them Zombieland zombies, because there is something so specific about them. They are not your shuffling undead of Walking Dead or Dawn of the Dead. These are the running infected that we saw in 28 Days Later, and the amount of juices, you brought it up, is what makes this so distinctive. So I actually had a question for you about the juices. And then we'll come back, and I do want to talk about the evolution of zombies that you mentioned. So these zombies are defined by bodily fluids to some degree, and there's so much vomit and blood and goo. And what were you using for that stuff? I imagine there's a certain amount of CGI augmentation, but what were you guys using?
Oh, all the goo is really there. It was disgusting. Always, too. Even the bald guys are slimy. There's no way out. If you were going to be a zombie, there was no way not to be gooey. Everybody went home wet and sticky and right into a shower. And those nights were cold, so there are a lot of tents with heat in them, or these guys wouldn't have made it. The idea with the slime and goo, most of it is actually hair gel in their hair to keep it wet, because once it dries, it still looks wet. So we try and get the hair done as fast as possible so there was a chance for these guys to maybe not freeze as badly once they were outside. But we had a lot of spray bottles with watered down Methicil. We had tubs of hair gel, and then we had blood that was mixed up. We had combinations of coffee and chocolate and coffee and Karo syrup and all sorts of different things. So we had different viscosities and different sort of colors. And the stuff was sort of layered on. You know, the darker stuff would leak out of the nose and the mouth and the ears, and lighter stuff around the eyes because we didn't want them to turn into raccoons or anything like that. But we were also dressing the clothing as we were doing it and just splattering and splashing everybody. We actually also used a lot of Skin Illustrator as the base foundation to get the colors down and the drips down, and literally just did it, you know, the airbrush colors like with a brush so that the drips and stuff would, you know, run down their arms or their legs or their faces and then stay there. And then we would augment that with slime when it was time to shoot. But we were taking the Illustrator colors to the wardrobe, to everything, and just really trying to like age them up and make them uniformly look as gross as possible, because the clothing comes to us really dry, and it's like, well, if they're going to be leaking through their body and through their clothing, so we have to get it all messed up. So we were our own hair department for it. The hair department graciously was, you know, offering to help mess people up, but we were getting in and messing up their hair and then painting blotches into their hair. And we had a couple guys that were willing to let us shave pieces out of their beards and put in a wound and then add more hair back to it. We were trying to make it not look, like a Halloween makeup. Quite often it rides inside the hairline, and we wanted this to encompass the whole head. So if somebody had shorter hair or they were bald, the wounds were everywhere, and depth appropriate for anatomy, obviously. But that meant the slime and everything was all over the place too. But cleanup was pretty easy because they were already sweaty by the time they came to us, and they were already sort of greased down. So we were just adding a cleaning oil to all the lotion and oil they already had on them. When we did the vomit, quite a bit of that. Well, let's see. Woody had us change the vomit when Madison was vomiting in the car because he wanted more chunks in it. So
not only did he get script approval, he got vomit approval?
Yeah. Woody had vomit approval, and he was very vocal about he thought that she should have a little bit more volume, substance in her vomit. So we had vanilla pudding, and we were mixing some stuff with a little bit of honey, and then we had almond milk, and then we had granola, like chunk granola, that we would mix into that for something that would hold a shape inside it and not break down too fast. But if somebody accidentally took some of this in and swallowed it, at least, it's a nutritious meal.
Yeah, that sounds really good, actually. Was craft service saying if you have any left over?
It was a very fattening vomit for all involved. But we did do almond milk so that, the vegans were okay with everything. But we had a couple like drips and drools out of people's mouths and stuff with the coffee blood and stuff. And about 2 a.m., everybody was really wanting the coffee that wasn't decaffeinated anymore. So it served a double duty, I think. But everybody was just wet all the time, just wet and gross. And poor Zoe Deutsch, when she had to do the vomit stuff, I mean, I've cut footage of her. I always say, please, run the scene, wait till the camera's rolling, and then we'll load them up. And we got them to do that on all the zombies that were drooling and stuff because it just goes away really fast. So camera's rolling, we run in, we have our spray bottles and our squeeze bottles, we're filling people's mouths and squirting stuff in their ears, and then we run out, and then they yell action. Cameras and everything are already rolling. There were a couple times with Zoe's scenes because other people were involved, or there was a camera move through trees and grass involved, where we'd be saying, let's load her up last possible minute. And they'd be, okay, this is it, last minute. And then they'd, oh, hey, maybe we should move that tree. Or it'd be this conversation where you're just like, oh my God, she's got a mouthful of stuff. We need to move this along. So by the end of it, everybody got into the swing of it. But, everybody's department has so many things to do, and it was such a fast-moving shoot. Everybody wanted it to be right, obviously. Just getting that dance down so that we could make sure that we were all on point and then the actors were all comfortable was a little tricky at times. But the stunt team on this, we remade up the same 20 people as, all the close-up characters. And they were amazing, truly amazing. Just the best attitude the whole way through. And the last day was no different than day one. Still the same enthusiasm and literally enjoyment of what we were doing. And I think that held for all the departments. The fact, too, that a lot of us knew each other from the first one. We had same writers, the same director, same producer, same visual effects, same makeup effects. And then a bunch of the other people on the crew had been in other, 10 years ago, been in other capacities. So there's a great comfort zone right off the bat. And you knew everybody's name and you knew who to go ask the questions of. And things got into a groove very quickly as a result of that.
Well, I read that it was filmed in just a little over 2 months, which is shocking considering This is a very ambitious film with some major set pieces. So
this year. We shot it the beginning of this year.
That's incredible.
We started in January. And they started editing while we were filming. Literally, immediately as film came in, they started editing. And it was like all systems go to the last possible minute. And Paul Linden and the rest of the VFX guys, I think they delivered the final approved version 3 days before it screened for the public. But they'd already had a few test screenings of, the finished film, and there were still a few things that had to get done. But they were on it literally till 3 days before it premiered, which is the beauty of technology today, and also the curse, I guess, because I don't think they had lives for the months before it came out. And then all of a sudden it was literally over. So it's just weird that I'm looking at pictures in my phone and I'm going back to January and February and March, and we were on set. And here we are, and it's October, and the movie's already out.
Isn't that funny? It took 10 years for them to reboot and less than a year for them to finally make.
Yeah, and there's like thousands of VFX shots and so much more in this one, too. And they just did an amazing job. But I think that the 10-year gap, part of it was the script and having everything tonally right. And I think they did a couple drafts of it with some different writers right off the bat because Paul Wernick and Rhett Reese weren't available. And I think, again, I want to say Woody was one of the people that was more vocal, just felt that it needed that voice, that attitude that those two guys had. And eventually they became available and they were able to like pick it up. And they, of course, always have all their own awesome ideas. And I think it all went into this stew pot. And over the course of the last couple years, the script that you see on screen came together. And then the actors got involved with script approval. And I think it was just more character-related stuff there. I mean, it's none of my business to know that. It's just in talking to them, it just seemed like everybody felt personally invested in it and wanted to make sure it was really good. And so everybody really... The fact that everybody cared as much as they did and had passion for it is what made it really cool. And the fact that Emma says we should do one every 10 years and see where these people are every decade is a pretty great idea.
Well, I think that like you said, the time that was spent in pre-production always results in a smoother shooting experience.
Yeah.
I would say the most ambitious project in my father's career, Jurassic Park, was probably the smoothest shoot because they had years of prep. And I think that's what we're seeing here with Zombieland Double Tap. I want to move on. We need to talk a little bit more about the evolution of the zombies in this film. There's the Homer, who is the big dumbass zombies chasing a butterfly in one scene. Yeah. The Hawking, the sort of smarter, then the Ninja, who you don't see until you're screaming and your guts are being ripped out. And finally, the T-800 or Bolt, which is named after Usain Bolt.
Listen to, yeah.
So can you tell me about each in just a little bit, and maybe what were you guys going after on the makeup effects side for each one of those?
Well, we really wanted to do like a visual homage to the concept. The Homers, we wanted them all overweight and balding and hopefully with a comb over. We tried to skew their skin tone a little more yellow, even, to be honest, to just sort of embrace that and go with it. And then the contact lens design for a lot of the characters, I was doing these things where it almost looks like your cornea sort of exploded in sort of a weird way. And we would skew towards the blue lenses for the Homers. So we're like one step away from him carrying a donut and being super obvious. Yeah, exactly. And then the Hawkings, the first concept that came through was somebody actually in a wheelchair. And we're like, no. And then it got more into like business suit attire and sort of smart. How do you present the smart dressed nerd? So hair pulled up and stuff like that. We figured, well, they pulled up so tight, it's going to last maybe for 10 years or whatever, and it's going to stay there. And we just tried to really make them look a little more haunting and a little more like a horror show kind of thing. And then the idea with the ninjas was a little more camouflage, where they would be a little more messed up. And the features wouldn't be so focused on. It's like they would sort of like blend into the background, literally dirty clothes, dirty faces, everything just sort of hiding their presence. So they were kind of the messier of all of them. The Hawkings were a little more tidy and a little more cleaned up and a little less leaky. And the homers were just, it's coming out everywhere. And I don't know how their comb overs lasted as long as they did, but like the very first homer, I mean, it's dead on Simpsons style. So it was fun. It was really fun to like come up with characters. And then the T-800, the whole idea of them being sort of indestructible, and you can keep shooting them and they fall down and get up and just keep coming after you no matter what. There wasn't really anything that we could do visually to sort of infer that sort of aggression and nonstop sort of violence. So we really focused on what does it look like if these things have been like out on the plains and they've been cooking in the sun. And that's when we went down they got a little bit of a barbecue sauce kind of vibe going, a little cooked in the sun, maybe a little dried out, but we didn't want to go too dry because we didn't want to go into Walking Dead territory. So we tried to find a balance there. And then this whole blister thing. When we did the first T-800, the one that they see by the RV, we had all these separate little blister appliances. And we had the big wounds that the traditional Zombieland zombies wore. And then we layered on all these blisters and stuff. And then we had some transitional ones. And the idea was that this character was in a zipped up jacket kind of holding all his stuff together. So all you really saw were his head and hands. So we're just layering this stuff on this guy. And Ari's just thrilled to be wearing all this stuff. And we're thinking, we're like really proud. Oh, look, we've got over like 20 prosthetics on his head now, like little blisters on his ears and inside his ears and inside his nose and just everywhere. Thinking, yeah, this is going to be the most extreme one so far. And then you cut to us like the last 2 weeks of the show, and there's guys with like 20 or 30 just caked in stuff, just buried in all this stuff because we're like, they're going by so fast and they're in the dark. We need to read the same thing that we saw on Ari as the T-800 #1. So it was a bit of a challenge coming up with their look, and then we cemented it. We did these ones that looked like they had been through being beat up and, their heads bashed in and they were still coming. But again, they were coming so fast, you barely see any of it. So I'm going to have to find you some nice stills so we can show you what they look like.
Well, a few things about those T-800s. Number one, I just saw Terminator Dark Fate, and there is a new spin on the endoskeleton that gets beaten down and gets up just like the T-800 in Zombieland, that sort of broken body kind of backwards getting up. And I was like, oh my gosh, They nailed it in Zombieland.
Great minds think alike, apparently. Yeah. That's cool. How was that movie?
It was really fun. Okay. I think you'll enjoy it. And then the other thing is it leads to the T-800 showdown between Thomas Middleditch and Luke Wilson leads to one of my favorite scenes, which is when Thomas and Luke succumb to the infection. How did they specifically take to becoming infected?
Oh my God, Thomas Middleditch was so into it. It was ridiculous. He had so much fun. The tricky part was it was a fight scene, and Ruben wanted them to literally blink, and then their eyes were different, and then their face was different, and then we'd cut away and cut back, and then it was more extreme again. He wanted it to just be this rapid acceleration, so that the fight was really truly two zombies versus two humans, like as fast as possible. And they were trying to do as much of the shot as almost like a oneer, where the camera's traveling and one guy ducks down and another guy stands up. A lot of really cool old school tricks. So there were stunt doubles that had to match, but we were doing it not quite on the fly, but we kind of had an idea in mind of what we wanted to do with each one of those guys. And then it really came down to how much are they comfortable with? And then in this zombie world, how far can we push it in the span of like a 5-minute fight? It's not even 5 minutes. How far can they go? So that was sort of our limitation, was they can't go truly full zombie. But I mean, to be honest with you, they ended up with prosthetics on with holes in their face and just all this stuff leaking out of them. I mean, they were really up for going for it. We were up for pushing it as far as we could. And then it's just funny because, the zombie logic comes in and then you're having a debate with Ruben. Well, how fast could you turn and how fast could your cheeks cave in? And, silly sorts of things where you take 2 steps back and go, we're really having a conversation about this. And it's like, what serves the movie? And then we would push it a little bit further. And then when we were done with the fight scene, I think Ruben's first comment was, do you think we went far enough? So it's like we were all sort of like figuring it out as we went. The good part was we had 2 actors that were really gung-ho about doing all of it and wearing the lenses and just spitting up junk and having no problems doing it.
Well, that read on camera. I could tell they were going for it, and I love that. I will say that, a zombie movie where the power grid is fine and everyone's is really thrown reality out of the window, so he shouldn't have worried so much about that.
Well, they do talk about how...
The dams,
as long as the water keeps coming, there's always going to be power, so... I guess there's a lot of rain in the last 10 years.
Okay, I have a question here for you. And tell me, was it 28 Days Later that most inspired this infected makeup scheme? Or if not, what was it for you?
It was a disease book that inspired all the leaking. It was literally, honest to God, it was literally like 3 pages on bed sores. That was one of the grossest things I think I'd ever seen. Like, if you look at the wounds on the zombies, they're not like fresh torn open. The edges are sort of like caved in and are sinking into the body, and the wound is abscessing, and there's like white colors and yellows and just this unhealthy stuff in there. And then there's pus leaking out of all of it. So we started with hoof and mouth disease and these abscesses from bed sores. And then realized we needed a contrasting color besides blood to the white. So we went darker. And then, it was 28 Days Later, right? Was the zombie film where they had a lot of the same thing. They had a lot of, they had sort of like a rabies kind of thing. So there's definitely a similarity for sure there.
I think that attention to detail, it is a comedy, and a lot of the stuff goes by very quickly, but as you said at the beginning of the interview, it does feel grounded in reality, what you did with those zombies. And for my money, I find them to be so much scarier than dry, shuffling walkers.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we talked about them drying up, the whole thing too was, does that mean they stiffen up? And then there was no threat from the pacing of this story. So we were trying to serve the script at the same time. And the script was all about fast-moving action, and just like the ending is just a frenzy of zombie carnage.
Oh, that ending is a great sort of, the tower, the free fall thing in the first one. So you guys upped that with Babylon, which is basically a big tower.
Yeah. And it's funny because there was so much more that was filmed that you don't see. Just as far as confrontation and the mob down below, as well as the mob coming through upstairs. I'm hoping there's a behind the scenes or some sort of director's cut or something at some point where you maybe get to see some more of the production value, because you're moving through so many things so fast. There's just some really great lines too that didn't make it. But Bill Murray made it, so.
Let's talk about that. I didn't know how on earth they're going to bring Bill back. He gets killed in the first one, but he makes a cameo at the end. Yeah. What was it like working with Bill? He is a killer, zombie killer. Yeah. Tell us about that.
The whole scene is basically him realizing that he's the premier zombie killer, and realizing it in the moment of this thing going down, and just keeping a level head through it. But it was so funny because it was like, just the fact that it was him and Al Roker in the beginning. And it's like, all right, Mr. Roker, here's your cup of vomit. Would you like to load up yourself? It's just like a trip sort of experience. But he was just as game too. Bill had already been through all of it, so he was super casual, and just loving the choreography and the fact that he could almost dance his way through this crowd and just take people out. So he was only there for just that one day, but oh my God, they got so much stuff in that one day. All those celebrity interviewers and Al Roker, and then that whole lobby scene. It was literally all one day crazy fest on an actual location.
absolutely inspired scene at the end there. And Bill Murray was in fine form as really channeling some Ghostbusters ass kicking, because I haven't seen Bill do that since Ghostbusters, that kind of way he does, but he's brilliant in it. I want to transition now because so much of the film is fast, and you've been saying that, we miss a lot. But one thing that makes Zombieland and Zombieland Double Tap great is that title sequence, which is a slow-mo orgy of zombie killing. And we do get a close look at the zombies in that sequence. Can you tell us how filming those title sequences differed from shooting the film?
It was interesting because the title sequence was actually the first day of filming. And they had 3 camera units going in this field at the same time, outdoors in the sun, trying to match the angles of the sun going down. We just literally had daylight to shoot. And we had different groups of zombies. There were some that were like Greenpeace protesters that still had like green face paint on. And there was like the bums from outside the White House gate, and then there were some that were Secret Service guards. I mean, there's so much happening just in the look of each character, but they're literally just a kill. And they're just flipping through the scene and spewing blood and vomit as they go by, and then they're gone. But it was really fun. It was a manic day, though. I mean, the fact that we had 3 units going at the same time meant that we had large groups of zombies all over the place. And then one group was with the lead actors. So the makeup crew was fragmented. So it was a bit sort of schizophrenic of a way to start the movie. But in a way, too, it was really good because it kind of set the tone. You kind of saw that all these characters were badasses and they were kicking ass, and you were seeing all this stuff just blowing up and flying out of the way. And it just sort of cemented who they were, how this thing was going to go down, and the level that we wanted to strive for in all the kills the whole way through.
It totally does set the tone for this movie, and I love it. I love that title sequence. I think a great title sequence can, like you said, set the tone, and it does. And I love that you get the slow-mo Bellagio fountains of goo, and you can really enjoy it.
That seems to be a favorite. I mean, to be honest, Paul Linden, the VFX supervisor, had his heart set on this whole grenade launcher thing and having a Homer explode in the middle of the field. And we kept saying, if there's time, we'll come back to it. And we were he and I were like hell-bent on blowing up this body in the middle of the field. But there was just so much other stuff to do. It just didn't happen.
So, Tony, I know, and everyone listening knows, that making a film of this size takes a massive team, and pulling off this many zombie gags takes a massive team. And I would like to give you a chance to give any shout outs to key crew. We're going to include at the end of the article a comprehensive crew list.
Oh, that would
but
be
if
awesome.
there's anyone on the team in any department that you'd like to shout out, some MVPs.
Yeah, okay. This is good because quite often our credit list gets cut, so thank you.
This is what we do.
That's good. The most important people here artistically in the shop were Lilo Tavo, and then Barney Berman actually came in and did some sculpting with us as well. Brian Christensen here wrangled everything, including the boxes of hundreds of prosthetics that went out every day. Aaron Romero ran, I think he and Megan Riley ran most all of them themselves. Just never-ending mass production. And then on set, it was Tom Flouts and myself kind of running the show. And then we had Andre Freitas as our third, but he was really our local, like, man on the ground. When we had people that were local being cast to play the Homer or whatever, or the hay baler zombie, Andre would do their life cast there in Atlanta and then send us the mold so that we could do the stuff here. So everybody sort of like fit in together really well. So Andre's really a big part of the team. Besides that, we had Ken Banks Jack Santry. It's like that being on the spot thing where it's like, quick, name all these people.
No, this is why we're going to have a comprehensive list at the end. If Tony didn't mention you just now, he loves you. It's there's a lot of folks. So yeah. I have to ask, was it a foam show? I imagine this was mainly foam, or was it silicone? All silicone.
All silicone, yeah. We had very little foam. Like the heads that were blown open were foam just because of the position that the skin was in the skull, and it had to sort of defy gravity. And in silicone, it would have been too heavy. But all the prosthetics that overlapped that piece, all those were silicone. The goal was really like depth to the skin and a sick sort of translucency. And it just seemed so much easier with silicone to actually be able to achieve that.
And were you mixing in Pros-Aide transfers at all?
Yeah, we used some Pros-Aide transfers, but very minimally. And then on the background ones, we had a lot of tattoo transfers, especially for the T800s for all the blistering, because to draw all that stuff would have just been horrendous. So we had a lot of flat artwork that came into play then. But there was an army of people here, and then there was also an army of people on set that were the makeup crew. Besides the three, it's like, well, the three of us didn't do all of it. Obviously, there were trailers full of people like Matt Sprunger and Laura Dandridge, Eric Garcia. They're just another army there. And then for the last 2 weeks, where we had all the Babylon stuff, I was finally able to bring in some people from LA to join in and just get crazy with it. And we brought in Bill Corso and Barney Berman and Wallace Kahn and Mark Neiman and Bart Mixon, Sue Laprelle, just another slew of people and a whole nother trailer full of people just to help make all that stuff happen. And I've got pictures of all those folks at work, more or less, too, that I can give you.
Well, it's music to my ears. It's music to everyone at Stan Winston School's ears and our students' ears that an army of makeup artists were working on this. And this leads to my final question for you. I am seeing, especially on television, but nice to see it in films too, a fantastic resurgence of practical effects and makeups. And I would like to get your perspective on that. Are you seeing it as well?
I am, and we've been called to do a lot of practical stuff. We're doing a couple of TV shows right now, and it's all sort of disguise-ish type stuff, sort of along the lines of the Sacha Baron Cohen thing. But it's also some fantasy stuff, or things that you could easily justify someone doing digitally. And they're choosing to go a practical route and actually have the stuff there for the actors to interact with and be lit standing next to an actor and just be part of the scene. And I think that's so refreshing, because for a while it was feeling like people weren't even bothering to do character designs prior to a show. They go, well, we can put all the characters in digitally and we'll just figure out what they look like somewhere down the road. And then there was literally nothing on screen, like practically in the moment. And it just seems like that's really turned completely around at this point. And I hope it stays that way, because I think everybody's doing really great work, like American Horror Story and everything else. Everybody keeps upping the bar and inspiring everybody else to come up with new things. And I think we're all sort of like feeding off of each other's creativity and coming up with really cool stuff. I mean, the stuff that Greg and Howard are doing on Walking Dead, I mean, they've got to up their own bar all the time because they're doing such great work to start with. And then it's like, how do we push that? What do we come up with new? And they're doing like these tribute zombies and things for the fans. And it's like, it's so nice that a guy who's a fan himself is writing and directing and producing and sharing his love for what he's doing. And then he's doing Creepshow and all this other stuff now too. And he's bringing practical stuff back literally himself, single-handedly, in everything he's doing. And I think that inspires other production companies because they see how successful Greg and Howard are with what they're doing and how great it is on camera. And then you hear the actors going nuts about, how great it was to actually work with a creature. And then things pop up and then they disappear sometimes. And you're like, Swamp Thing looked beautiful. What happened?
Brilliant work on that suit. One of the best suits I've seen. Just gorgeous. And I think
performance too. I mean, everything about it was really solid. And it's presented moody. It's lit well. It's got atmospheric music. It's like, it's frustrating when you see something done really well that that doesn't get legs, it makes you wonder who's making the decisions and what the decisions are based on, because the quality of work out there nowadays seems really consistent and really inspiring, and it's great to be a part of all of it.
Well, we're seeing the same thing you're seeing, and I think you pointed out something that's kind of the key, and that is the fan aspect. I think there's a generation of producers who grew up in the 80s, and I think we're seeing this leaning back towards that texture, and it's wonderful. And they're calling the shots now, so they can say, no, I want makeups in my movies. So it's a great time to be a makeup effects artist.
And you'll see things from your childhood suddenly being rebooted as something brand new for another generation. Yeah. And that's just as exciting too.
Can you tell us the new series that are coming up? Or is that on the down low?
Unfortunately, they're disguise related. Like, we did Bad Grandpa and shot for a year and a half and couldn't talk about it for 2 years. And same with Sacha Baron Cohen's show. And this is the same sort of thing. Any of these things we do, it's like they're basically not supposed to exist. So technically we're working on nothing. But we're also doing a horror film for Chris Landon, who we did Happy Death Day with. And it's one of the funniest scripts I've read in a while. It's basically the concept of Freaky Friday with two people switching bodies, except it's the serial killer and the girl switching bodies, and it's Vince Vaughn as the serial killer. So he's suddenly playing a 16-year-old girl in a serial killer's body. It literally is like, it was a script on par with Zombieland, where it's just a laugh out loud kind of thing. So, but it's just, in the director's own words, Chris Landon, it's balls out gonzo gore fest. And it really is. I think they're trying to see how far they can push it within the context of humor and get away with it. So we just started filming, so it'll be an interesting experience to see what he is able to achieve.
Oh, I can't wait. And I can't wait to find out what these top secret ones are. But Tony, I want to thank you for sitting down with us today and talking about your and your team's excellent work on Zombieland Double Tap. And I hope Emma Stone, her 10-year plan, and maybe hopefully it's sooner, and we get to see another one before 10 years is up. But thank you, Tony.
Thanks for everything. I really appreciate it. And I love what you guys are doing with the school. I think it's amazing that it's out there for people to access, and the quality of it is as brilliant as it is. So keep it up.
Thanks, Tony.